Well, it's day 2 of the government shutdown, and it looks like the Trump administration may be on the cusp of a dramatic reorganization of the federal government. Call it Doge 2.0, call it whatever you want. Something pretty major could be coming. Before I dive into that and break down all of the details the media is not doing a good job of breaking down, the corporate media is not doing a good job of breaking down, just make sure to subscribe over at undercurrents.tv for the full premium experience of the show. We appreciate it. You get the full versions of our interviews with great thinkers like Lionel Shriver. Subscribe on YouTube, where we're almost at 100,000 subscribers, and of course, wherever you get your podcasts as well. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at this clip of Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, being berated is probably a good word for it, berated on Capitol Hill by a Democratic member on Wednesday.
The president is unhinged. He is unwell.
What are you doing? A lot of folks on your side are too. I don't control.
Oh my God, please. That performance in front of the generals, that
I didn't see it.
Is so dangerous. You know I serve on Foreign Affairs and Appropriations. This is a collision of those two things. Our allies are looking elsewhere. Our enemies are laughing.
I just left
you
the
have a
Speaker's
president who is, you have a president who is unwell.
The president is unhinged. Now, personally, on a political level, I can't believe Democrats are spending 1 second, wasting one breath on whether or not Donald Trump's sombrero memes are, quote, racist right now, let alone flatly calling them racist right now, when they could be doing what Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did just yesterday in a joint video where they just talked about healthcare. The contrast between Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and then Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that is to say the establishment and the populists, that is a stark contrast, and it doesn't look good for Democratic leadership, who, again, is now more than 10 years into the Trump era of American politics, and just struggling so badly to adjust, even in 2025, even after Donald Trump comes back, after January 6th, after all of the lawfare, wins the primary, wins the presidency with cultural momentum at his back, and here they are with the silver platter political gift of Biden-era healthcare expansions on the table, and they're wasting time, any amount of time, talking about racism because Donald Trump posted a meme that most Americans would not find offensive at all. Now, whether or not the president of the United States should be posting those memes in the midst of a government shutdown, that's going to be a lot more debatable if you talk to the average American. But at the same time, they have a political gift in the form of these Biden-era healthcare expansions, and it's a waste every second you're not talking about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the truth on what's actually on the table when it comes to health insurance, because, again, I don't think the media is doing a perfectly good job, but this is going to set up what we're going to do here in this video is talk about why this government shutdown is different from any other government shutdown that you remember. And the first place to start is what former Politico reporter Rachel Bade posted and then just got absolutely dogpiled over for really no good reason after the shutdown commenced, which was to say, this is a Democratic government shutdown. And in fact, that should be what Democrats are eagerly leaning into. That is what the Democratic base, as I wrote on Unheard recently, wants to see. This is a historic level of unfavorability. If you look at polls, one just in July, as I wrote about a couple of days ago, with Democrats of the Democratic Party. It is almost at Tea Party levels of low favorability. And that tells you everything you need to know. What happened during the Tea Party? Republicans, who are now basically in control, including Russ Vought, were all for shutting down the government. Ted Cruz shutting down the government. These were the people that were called wacko birds by John McCain, and it was clear to them at the time, whether it was cynical or not, it was clear to them that this is where the political momentum on the right was. It was with obstructionism of what Republican voters, the grassroots, not every Republican voter, but the grassroots saw as a sort of red line being crossed by Obamacare, by a massive sort of expansion of government oversight in the economy. And that felt like a red line to a lot of Americans. DACA felt like a red line to a lot of Americans. Title IX under Obama felt like a red line to a lot of Americans. And the Tea Party got behind government shutdowns, rallied the base. It was a big boost to conservative media, big boost to Tea Party groups. And Now, ultimately, of course, it culminated in the rise of Donald Trump because still many Republicans didn't pick up on the populist message or the real meaning of the populism, the sort of animus behind it, which was economic and cultural alienation. But we'll get to that in a moment. It's so obvious for Democrats that their base wants to see them showing some spine. And Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are just capable of going through the motions. They've only realized step A, which is that the base wants to see them showing some spine. They haven't executed on step B, which is to actually show some damn spine, because Hakeem Jeffries is doing this performative, like theater, shutdown theater, in a way that looks so fake. And it's fake because, he doesn't feel like one of those grassroots populist progressives. It's just not him. It's not Chuck Schumer. So Rachel Bade posted, thing is, quote, Democrats shut the government down, not Republicans. Small technicality, I know. This, as she put it, made people go ballistic, quote, ballistic. Even though it was just a factual point. You can read into it. It can be a Rorschach test. You can read into it however you want, whose fault it really is. We've gone through this with a million Republican-led shutdowns. They would always say Democrats are the one that are shutting down because they're not compromising unreasonable issues. And again, fair argument, but it's not the fact. The fact is who is depriving the other side of the votes, right? Republicans are virtually unified with the exception of basically Rand Paul on where on the what's called a continuing resolution to fund the government, the stopgap government funding bill. They're basically unified. Now, of course, Mike Johnson said they didn't want to govern by continuing resolutions anymore. That's been a long Freedom Caucus priority, and it's horrific that we fund our government this way. Nonetheless, that aside, we do fund our government this way. Mike Johnson hasn't been able to maneuver out of it. House Republicans haven't been able to maneuver out of it, nor has really anyone. So the point Bade was making is that it's Democrats who are depriving Republicans of the votes. Every Republican in the Senate, with the exception of Rand Paul, who could vote to pass the continuing resolution, has voted to pass the continuing resolution. There's literally nothing left for them to do. They control the House. And by that, I mean the chamber. They control the upper chamber, the Senate. They also control the House, of course, and the lower chamber. So they can, as long as they have the votes in the House, they can pass a continuing resolution, but they can't beat a Senate filibuster. So it is Democrats who are voting against funding the government in the most literal sense of that. And again, this should be something that Democrats are leaning into. They shouldn't be trying to blame anyone else. They should be saying, hell yeah, we are obstructing the government because the Biden-era healthcare subsidies, any restriction of those expansions, which are set to expire at the end of the year, is going to put people's lives on the line. This is exactly the message we've heard from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders, but Dem leadership is too dense and obtuse, even now in 2025, to get that through their heads. So I want to make that point, but probably the biggest reason this is different from other recent government shutdowns is because Republicans have consolidated power in the executive branch in a very intentional and academic sense. So this goes back to Nixon-era questions about impoundment and the president's control over the purse strings of the country's budget. And there are people on the right, Russ Vought, who's the Office of Management and Budget Director, once again in Trump 2.0, who believe that actually a lot of these powers belong with the president. That, for example, if you're an executive agency, your layers of bureaucracy shouldn't be able to subvert the will of the president, which is something that happened regularly in Trump 1.0, that those should be controlled by politics, by the political. And that sounds kind of dirty, right? Like, why would we want the EPA to be political? But what it means in that sense is that it should be responsive to democracy. Lowercase d democracy, that it should be responsive to the voters. So if the voters put a Republican president or a Democratic president in the White House, for example, let's take a Democratic president, the Chevron revolving door lobbyist turned EPA staffer should not be able to go against President Bernie Sanders. I guess he's independent, but President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And you flip that, and it's the same thing where the ATF under alcohol, tobacco, and firearms under a Republican president shouldn't be able to subvert the will of a Republican president and kind of get away with it. A lot of these powers have been consolidated. So right now, this is breaking news in Politico. I'm going to read from the article. President Donald Trump said Thursday that he'll speak with Office of Management and Budget Director Russ Vought about which, quote, Democrat agencies should be nixed as the government shutdown enters its second day. So Trump posted on Truth Social on Thursday morning, I have a meeting today with Russ Vought, he of Project 2025 fame, a little bit of a troll there, to determine which of the many Democrat agencies, most of which are a political scam, he recommends to be cut, and whether or not those cuts will be temporary or permanent. As Politico explains, 750,000 federal employees could be furloughed, according to the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office. But while the dismissals that often accompany shutdowns are generally temporary, Vought's OMB circulated a memo last week asking agencies to prepare major reduction in force plans for a shutdown scenario. On Wednesday, Russ Vought told House Republicans that these mass firings would kick off, quote, in a day or two, according to Politico. They continue to say White House officials are seeking to portray any layoffs as a necessary and disciplined step as Democrats push to extend insurance subsidies for the ACA Affordable Care Act in exchange for their votes on the GOP's continuing resolution. So think about that. What Trump is doing right here is threatening Democrats with a massive reduction, potentially in the federal workforce and executive branch powers, if they don't come to the table. And he's doing that knowing that they're not going to come to the table, because I bet you they'll do it. I bet Republicans want to do this. They want the shutdown to go on long enough that Russ Vought is able to sort of wave the magic wand and use these new consolidated powers in the executive that they're testing by making moves that other presidents wouldn't have seen as constitutional, and then kicking them into the court system to test precedent, like Humphrey's executor, for example, which came out of the Roosevelt administration as Roosevelt was testing the limits, as we all know, of his own presidential power given to him by the Constitution, or given to the office by the Constitution. So Trump is like, that's a troll, because basically what he's saying is we're probably doing this. The Project 2025 stuff about to happen. And obviously some of that already happened in like Doge 1.0. But some people in DC have sort of been coyly referring to this as potentially Doge 2.0. And actually this is just breaking while I'm talking. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, as of Thursday afternoon, is saying it's, quote, unlikely senators will be in the Capitol voting this weekend, all but guaranteeing the government shutdown goes into next week. So that means probably starting tomorrow, Friday, we'll start to see Russ Vought making what he hopes are permanent changes, of course, until maybe a Democratic president comes into office, but making what he hopes are permanent changes to the federal bureaucracy. So that is combined with Mike Johnson saying earlier today as well that Republicans, quote, have nothing to negotiate on the government shutdown, because Republicans are making this argument that I think politically is a very good argument. I'll talk about some of the pitfalls of it in just a second, but they have Democrats pinned on the Democrats' resolution, the Democrats' counter proposal, which does include not exactly what Republicans are saying. Republicans are saying that it technically, it depends on how you phrase this. So let me just say what it is, and you can judge for yourself what's accurate phrasing. So I'm reading from the Wall Street Journal here. But the Biden White House, you may remember, expanded, and if you've benefited from this, you definitely remember, quote, in 2021, the Biden administration expanded eligibility for the tax credits and increased subsidy amounts in Affordable Care Act health coverage. Quote, the enhanced provisions eliminated the prior income cap for eligibility, 400% of the federal poverty level of $32,150 for a family of four, and lowered the maximum percentage of income enrollees can be required to pay out of pocket. The enhanced subsidies were extended in 2022 and are set to expire at the end of 2025. 22.4 million of the 24 million Americans enrolled in the ACA are getting subsidies, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. The CBO estimates extending the enhanced subsidies would cost $350 billion through 2034. So this isn't something that has always been part of Obamacare. This is something that in the pandemic era, which the Biden administration really took his license to spend a ton of money after the Trump administration did it, although arguably by 2021 the state of emergency was different. That is, either way, that is to say, spending increased dramatically, and this was part of it. But people have come to rely on these subsidies, and premiums absolutely will increase at the end of the year if these subsidies are not expanded. Now, do Republicans have a good case that, like college tuition, the more that the federal government is subsidizing premiums, the more the price is going to go up over time? Absolutely. So in the long term, does pumping these subsidies into the ACA increase premiums? Again, just like college tuition, pumping federal subsidies to offset the cost of tuition? Yes. But over time, of course, it gets less and less affordable unless you're on the government dole and unless you're taking subsidies. So that's a completely fair argument. What's a political weapon for Democrats is that people are already paying stupid amounts of money for health insurance, and they're about to see an even less affordable system at the hands of Republicans in the new year if these aren't expanded, or if, and this is everybody's preference really, but except maybe the industry, but if there was a long-term, like, quote, conservative solution, the replace part of the repeal and replace everyone was promised for 10 years during the Tea Party years. The problem is Republicans they genuinely do not have a consensus or anywhere near a consensus on what a conservative and humane health insurance plan would look like. So that's a gift for Democrats, no question about it. Where it gets tough for Democrats is, we'll keep going through the Journal here. The Journal asks, are unauthorized immigrants eligible for ACA subsidies and Medicaid? Well, it says migrants in the country illegally aren't eligible to enroll in the ACA marketplace. The GOP's new tax law, that's the one big beautiful bill, signed by Trump in July, revoked eligibility from, quote, lawfully present immigrants. That is an important distinction. So that could include refugees, asylum seekers, and some visa holders. The Biden administration massively expanded the population of refugees, asylum seekers, and some visa holders, along with migrants who actually weren't here lawfully. So Republicans are reacting to Democrats now saying, oh, these, quote, lawfully present folks all should be covered as well. Now, is that captured accurately by every Republican saying illegal immigrants are free to get, Democrats are shutting down the government to give illegal immigrants health care? I think you can quibble over whether or not that's fully accurate. But there's another part of it as well that also helps the Republican argument, which is basically that Democrats are also, in their proposal, trying to reverse what Republicans did by lowering the federal match percentage that states, quote, can receive for medical service to unauthorized migrants. So reducing that spending by about $28 billion through 2034, according to CBO. Democrats want to reverse that change. So in that case, we are actually talking about people who are, like, by definition, here in the country illegally. So what it means, Democrats then are shutting down the government in order to ensure the federal government reimburses states for emergency treatment of illegal immigrant health care. So you have to sort of parse it in that way, that it's like a federal reimbursement. Technically, it is federal dollars going to pay for illegal emergency care, illegal immigrant emergency care. On the other hand, though, this is just a lowering of the percentage. So those reimbursements are still going to happen under the Republican plan, because it's an impossible situation to find yourself in as a society when people are coming to emergency rooms in need of care and states, don't have the money to pay for it. So that's sort of a separate debate, but it's actually what's happening. Now, I will say, in sanctuary jurisdictions and other places, people who are here illegally use the emergency room as most people would use like a primary care doctor. So because they can't enroll in the ACA marketplace, they come in for things that aren't necessarily in needs of necessarily emergencies, and can cause serious wait times and all of that in emergency rooms. Like that can genuinely be a problem, but that's the nuance you're seeing covered very poorly, as Republicans are getting fact-checked, and sometimes they're absolutely using like sloppy language, no question about it. But then the media is sort of going all the way to the other side and acting like there's no there. There isn't this massive new population that is the size of multiple states put together that came over in 3 years that, U.S. citizens are paying for in their tax dollars. So, also a way this is unlike other shutdowns is that Trump 2.0 is pushing the boundaries of what's technically allowed to be political. So Democrats are already raising the issue of a Hatch Act violation, meaning you can't use federal resources for political ends. This is a big controversy. You may remember when Trump decided to do the RNC at the White House in his first administration. It was during COVID. Because some of these agency websites like Housing and Urban Development, if you go to the website, it has a big sign saying the government is shut down because of Democrats. So that's being pushed as a potential Hatch Act violation, but it is, again, different. This is a different shutdown, and because of the way both parties are treating it, I expect it to go for a while because the incentives for Democrats are to dig in, as we discussed earlier, and the incentive for Republicans is sure as hell not to compromise on health insurance for non-citizens, federal reimbursement of health insurance or subsidies for non-citizens. So nobody really has an incentive to come to the table here. There's some reports that, like, quote, moderates are already trying to work out deals with each other. I think Democrats, there's some reporting in this extent as well, have identified Donald Trump as the likeliest source of a potential breakthrough because Donald Trump loves making deals. He almost made a deal with Nancy Pelosi on DACA, as I always mentioned, back in, must have been like 2017 or 18, around that time period. So could Donald Trump be what's the right way to put it? The weak link? Possibly. I don't know if you even put it that way, because he probably could make some political hay of it. He could probably spin it as a win because, again, we were talking about people's health insurance, which, however you slice it, is extremely unaffordable. So then allowing those prices to be hiked at the end of the year, that's a problem for Republicans. So I could see Trump cutting a deal where you cut Dems' demands for migrant health care out, non-citizen health care out, and everyone can, pat each other on the back and call it a day, get back, open some of these agencies up. But Republicans also want to keep it open for at least a few days, or keep it closed for at least a few days to make some really drastic changes. Democrats want to fundraise. They want to give a shot in the arm to the grassroots that can just say resist, resist. And I don't mean that pejoratively. I think that's actually an important thing for your political constituency to feel like the leadership is listening. Now, for Democrats, the challenge is to make sure that leadership actually is listening and actually is looking at what, like, Bernie and AOC did, for example, and saying, hey, that's probably more in line with what people want to hear and people want to see from us. So, long way of trying to break down different elements of why this government shutdown is different from others. But I hope that it was helpful. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe over at undercurrents.tv and subscribe on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We will see you back here with more Undercurrents soon.